What's going on, everyone? It's your boy Dungeon coming at you with another Fell Seal Arbiter's Mark tips and tactics video. And in this one, I'm going to be showing you guys how to build proper characters and parties. So, if you want that party where people are swinging from the chandeliers and having loads of fun, you've come to the right place. Let's get right on into it. Alright, you guys, so as far as building characters and parties, the first thing I want to probably put out there for you guys is that you should match your class abilities. So, for instance, I have a fighter type melee class right here, the samurai, and I've paired the samurai up with the reaver. And reason is because honestly, if you don't know, the reaver is actually a really good class. Certainly early on, if you get your hands on a reaver, you'll be using their abilities quite often. But the cool thing here is that when you go to set your abilities, this custom class that you have here, like I said, I picked the reaver class abilities because it has some really good damaging abilities in tandem with a few like range abilities. They're not super far range, but like, when you can't make it all the way to where you need to go, you can still do something. You can still do some damage. And those abilities, I think they're a range of like 4 or something like that. They do come in handy. Now, this character does have dual wield, which if you don't know, dual wield is really good. Honestly, dual wield for a win. But that will pretty much make me want to use regular attacks more often than anything else, because with dual wield, that like upgrades your melee characters to be able to basically attack twice with regular attacks. So that's very good. The other thing is that you have to keep in mind is that while maybe you pair up a melee class with a melee class, you could, like if you have a like a range kind of like magic type class, right? Because this one's like based off of attack. It's a melee class based off attack. This one is a kind of like a range class based off of mind, right? So I paired the Plague Doctor with the Anatomist, and if you haven't unlocked this character, the Anatomist is kind of like a hybrid between I'll show you actually. It's a hybrid between some mender spells with some dark attack spells. So instead of like, the wizard has elemental spells, but they don't have any dark spells. This was just dark spells that it has. So it's kind of like a little bit of healing, a little bit of like, attack damage or whatever. So this is a based off of mind. All their abilities, this class is based off of mind, right? So if you look at the Plague Doctor, pretty much everything here is based off of mind. All right, there's a couple that are based off of nothing in particular, right? But yeah, so pairing those up can be really good, so that your character has like this character. You see the mind statistic is 239. I wouldn't want to use class abilities. I probably wouldn't want to use class abilities that will scale off of my attack stat, because it's not very high. And I could say the same thing for this character. It's got a really high attack statistic, but a really low mind statistic. Okay, so I wouldn't want to really use abilities that scale off of mind. Now this is kind of an exception right here. I've got a character that has the Templar class, which kind of scales off of both, right? So it kind of makes it a little bit of an exception on its own, because the Templar class, if you have forgotten, most of the abilities will scale off of both attack and mind. So depending on what you're going for, and I think two scales directly off of attack, right? So, but the other ones are scaling off of attack and mind. So it kind of opens it up. You can kind of do some kind of interesting things. And the other thing too is, like, when you're using a range class, you probably want to use something that is also something that complements it. Like if you feel like your range character is going to get into melee, then, you know, like this one right here, then, you know, pair it up with a melee type of abilities so that you can deal with when someone gets in your face. You know, if you play the character like completely, you know, staying out of melee, then pair it up with something that's going to benefit the range abilities. So this assassin is using a bow, and you're probably looking at a demon knight being like, what are you doing? Well, in the event that I get into melee, if you haven't unlocked the demon knight, I'll show you real quick, because this one has some really powerful attacks. Like this one deals 3 times dark damage in melee. So it doesn't matter what weapon I have. A bow, I could still use this in melee though. All right, it'll summon some, you know, dark corrupted blade, and it slashes out at my enemies. You know what I'm saying? And same thing with this one, right? I don't have to have a melee weapon to use it. So it allows this character to be a melee character and a ranged character. So in this particular combination, I have valued versatility over, you know, trying to accentuate or upgrade their primary ability. So, but you can go either way. You just have to be conscious what you're doing, and probably don't want to mix up different statistics for scaling purposes. All right. Okay, so this next one I want to talk about is setting your passives to complement your, you know, class build. In general, you want to set a character that has a focus on their mind statistic, typically with class passives that come from classes that also focus on their mind statistic, and the same thing with those that focus on attack statistic. All right. So, for instance, one of the first couple early game passives that you get that are really good are like life font. So your characters that are moving around the battle and taking damage in melee probably want to have something to be able to heal as they move around. So, you know, that works out really well. Attack expert is another one. I'll show you on this character. So I've got attack expert. That one is another one that's like really good. You can get that from the scoundrel class, and that one will increase your attack statistics. So you do more damage with your regular attacks, and you do more damage with any kind of skill that will scale off of your attack statistic. So you want to kind of pair those up, and same thing with the mind type of classes. You want to pair those up with your, you know, classes that focus on mind. So mana font, as you walk around, you gain more mana points. Mind expert, so you'll do just more damage in general. So I could potentially put that on this one. It looks like I don't know it yet, but that would be one that you'd want to put on there. You know, and there's other ones that you can do that could be, you know, decent. It just kind of depends on your class. Like if you're doing a bunch of buffs, like maybe side effects. If you're doing a lot of attack spells that are AoEs, maybe smart casting. You just kind of want to double down on whatever you're focusing in on. These can be decent for if you are trying to take a defensive posture with a class or two, like maybe in a battle that has a lot of enemies that are poisoning you. Then maybe you want to take fortitude, right? So you're just automatically immune to certain things, right? So that would be something that you'd want to focus in on. So another thing that I want to talk about is the reaction abilities that you have to set. And one of the first ones you get is probably one of my favorites, and that's counterattack. You can see here I have it set for a lot of my characters. Matter of fact, I'll just leave it like this. So you can see I have counterattack for a lot of my characters here. And the reason being is because first and foremost, it's a good one, but also I have a number of my characters set with dual wield, and what that does is you'll be able to hold two single hand weapons that your class allows you to hold, and when you do a regular attack, then you'll attack with both, pretty much doubling whatever damage that you are going to be doing. And when you get a counterattack, it'll have you do a regular attack back to the adjacent enemy. So by having two weapons, when someone attacks you, it's like a real big deal. Like you really are going to mess someone up. So it's a pretty good combo, honestly. It's like a wombo combo, okay? However, that aside, there are other really good counterattacks that you could set. Okay, so here I've got this one right here. Now, I get it, not a lot of people are hot for Bizarro, but he's kind of Bizarro. But look, I am trying to make the most out of my missions, so I am leveling the heck out of my other characters. I shouldn't say leveling. I'm getting a whole bunch of ability points and leveling up their classes, and I can actually do that more with with the story characters. So if I bring more of my story characters into a regular mission and a battle, and then I send everyone else on missions, then anyways, that's beside the point. The point I'm trying to make here is that he has a interesting one of his classes, and that's critical quicken. So whenever you get low, as long as you don't die when you get low, then you'll immediately break initiative and you'll have your turn right now. And that's kind of cool because it allows you to be able to like heal or run away or kill someone or whatever you need to do to get yourself out of the situation. So that one's kind of cool, certainly for him, or her. I don't know what kind of, I don't know, maybe it is a guy. Anyhow, and then there's ones like cripple and root. Right here I got one of these. I got root. I think it's, yeah, this one right here. I've got root and cripple and root. There's other ones like blind and bleed and stuff like that. And those ones will, when someone attacks you, you'll give them this debuff status effect. And certain ones are really good. Blind is pretty decent. Root for this character, since he's a ranged character, it's like really good because then you just move away from the danger and then they can't affect him anymore. So that's kind of cool. And then this one is kind of cool, cripple, because a lot of times enemies have some really sick skills, so cripple will stop them from using those skills as long as they have that debuff. Another one that's pretty good is like mute. So like if they're a spellcaster casting on you, you just completely shut them down. They can't cast any more spells as long as they have that debuff. So certain ones are pretty cool, and the reason why those are kind of cool is because they'll affect a good portion of enemies regardless of what kind of attack that it is. Whereas counterattack, it only will affect adjacent enemies. So you do got to kind of consider like where are your units going to be placed, because if they're going to always be away from melee combat, you probably don't want to give them counterattack, because it's never really going to be useful. But if they're sometimes close, sometimes far, or whatever, then maybe one of the other ones would be good. If they're like a big time, magic user type of class, then maybe you want to have counter magic if they have a high mana. If they are susceptible to taking damage, then maybe absorb mana is good. Maybe your character doesn't really use any mana points, right? But they're like a melee character or something like that. Could potentially give them Mystic Shield, because then they're not using the mana points anyways, So this is like every round basically, and you could combine this with weird stuff, but pretty much every round you will avoid taking one attack. Like that's like really big. That's like really big. So consider all these different elements to what choices that you make, and play around with it and see what works best for you in your party construction and your units. All right. Next thing I want to talk about is balancing out your party, and again, going with the 2-2-2. That's basically 2 casters, 2 melee, 2 hybrid, and I'll show you what I'm rolling with. And I'm actually not going to get too much in depth with these because that would just take too long. So I've got a kind of like a ranged assassin with a little bit of hybrid melee from the Demon Knight abilities. I've got a dual wielding sword spymaster with the gambler stuff, so a little bit of variety there. Melee ranger with the dual wield in tandem with the Templar abilities, so that's kind of cool. So there's 2 melee, 1 hybrid. I've got a caster, a healer, basically damage dealer, and then I've got another kind of like healer, kind of buff kind of character. Is not all the way ranked up the way that I'd like Bizarro to be at this moment, but still, he's got the healing abilities and a lot of the buff abilities put together for enough, leveled up enough for this purpose. And then I wanted to bring the dog, technically a Vangle, and this is probably a hybrid between melee and like magic type casting, honestly. So here's my 2 hybrids, here's my 2 melee, and here's my 2 casters, pretty much. However, I will say that I don't always necessarily do the 2-2-2. I really do like to have at least 2 melee, though. I will say that. Sometimes I'll roll with 1, sometimes I'll roll with something different, but this is a really good mix to depending on what type of battlefield that you're fighting on and stuff like that. Just make sure that you are mixing up job abilities of healing and removing debuffs. That's also really, really important. So Ranger has good abilities for removing debuffs. The Plague Doctor is really good at that. Bizarro is pretty good at that. And actually, depending on how you roll with your monster class, you could definitely set that up. And then obviously heals and damage dealing. So you just kind of want to have a balance here, and do keep in mind, whatever you're fighting against. So that's going to have a big effect on how well your party is going to work. All right. So let's go ahead and move on to the next thing. So the last thing we have here is building your party for the battle and map. So I kind of was talking a little tiny bit at the end of the last one about this, and basically you want to consider a few things. You want to consider the geography. All right, so this map, you start on some, like right here where I'm starting is really terrible because you cannot get a very good buff to your group because I have all the different elevation in the starting area. So this is actually really terrible. And then you consider that with the variety of elevations on the map itself, you've got a lot of variation. So that's also something. I mean, you can go all over the place in this map. And then you have to consider the water terrain tiles. All right, so you don't want anyone to drown. You don't want anyone to fall. So keep in mind that if you're at the edge, monsters, depending on what setting you have it at, if you have it at least veteran, they're going to try to knock you off for sure, and you'll take a lot of damage from this type of fall. This is a pretty good fall. Okay, so that's like 10 squares. That'll do like 100 damage depending. Also, you want to keep in mind if you're trying to get any treasure chests, this one you have to basically fly to get over here. also there might be other things too as far as geography goes, like lava and stuff like that. So consider, you know, wearing different type of footwear, like boots, that'll allow you to have a higher jump rating. That's very important for these type of mats. Hovering is very important for water terrains and lava terrain tiles. Having movement, I mean, this is a big map, so having a decent movement speed is going to be helpful. Being able to fly can be extremely helpful, just in general, not necessarily having to do with getting a treasure. But the other thing, obviously, is what are you fighting? So I've got some melee creatures, some thief type creatures, caster creatures, which are, you know, this one's fire related, this one's water related, I think. Yeah. And then, you know, more creatures on the other side. So basically completely surrounded here. This is really going to be probably a challenging map to defend on. Or, I mean, really, it's your I say defend because the situation. Like, you're already put into a defensive position, which, you know, isn't really what I particularly, that's not how I like to play. But so what I'll probably end up doing, this little tip here, I will probably, considering what is over here and what is over here, I'll probably rush the left, debuff the melee creature right here with rooting, probably debuff or something like that, so it doesn't attack. And once I take all this out, then I'll probably kill this caster, and then, you know, roll with the punches with whatever's left. And that's probably the way that I'll go. So I'll probably go heavy on this side and over here when I place my units. And matter of fact, let me go ahead and do that real quick, and I'll show you what it looks like. Alright, so I've placed my units. I've got my 2 melee units right here. I've got 2 of my hybrid, because this one is probably going to try to hit this creature up with a rooting debuff, and the rest of my guys will probably come together with a probably a swift attack if I can reach it. Otherwise, I'll probably just sit right here in this area and work out some buffs for my characters, and then just focus the attacks on this group of enemies, and that'll probably be the strategy. And I think that pretty much wraps this one up. Alright, you guys, that concludes this episode of Fell Seal Arbiter's Mark Tips and Tactics video, where I showed you how to build proper characters and parties. If you had fun, if you learned something, if you enjoyed watching this, hit that like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, press the bell icon so you don't miss another video, and as always, thanks, stay cool, and bye everyone.